Good morning. Welcome to Learn Biz, the podcast. How are you doing this morning, lovely Sandy B?
Good morning. Good morning. I hope everybody is having a great one.
Absolutely. So this morning we're going to do some follow-ups to a couple shows that we've already done. One of them has to do with Tiffany Haddish. You guys may remember that she got in a little hot water, some allegations. And so we're going to go ahead and do a follow up to that because apparently there is an update to the Tiffany Haddish story that's been out there circulating. And then for the another topic that we'll bring up, it has to do with I am I am
Athlete.
athlete. Thank you so much. I should remember that. I am athlete, and there's another show out there called The Pivot, and that's the new breakoff show. So we just did this show last week. So already, Sandy has already found the updates, and what we're going to talk about though is actually the other side. I think we presented one side, which is The Pivot. That's the new show, and I am athlete. I guess they have their own position as far as what happened as far as the breakup of the podcast. Is that right, Sandy?
Yeah, it's always interesting to listen to different sides and really get clued in. Rigo, good morning. We always appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely.
Rigo says in that Tiffany Haddish case, somebody got a big check. So we already know there's some, whenever you hear settlements, you already know. And many people were alleging that this might have been a money grab to begin with. So it's almost a big question mark sometimes when you see settlements because most people don't understand what a settlement really means, but we can talk about that. But
Absolutely.
we want to
So
start with
Sandy,
Tiffany.
I'm gonna turn it over to you, Sandy, to go ahead and kick us off with Tiffany's story.
Oh boy. Well, let's take a look here. We're going to take a look at a short clip from Comedy Hype News because Tiffany, comedian, actress. I mean, a personality all around. Who better to give an update on this story? This was back on the 20th. About this Tiffany Haddish story. So let's take a look and see what they have to say here. Let me know if the volume is okay.
Alrighty.
Thompson. Last week, it was
Yes.
reported that John and Jane Doe, the siblings that have sued Tiffany Haddish, accusing her of sexual assault and grooming, were ready to talk about a potential settlement. It was originally reported that they had attempted to reach out to the comedian, but heard nothing back. After announcing that they wanted to talk about a settlement, they stated part of the settlement deal would include Tiffany Haddish publicly apologizing for participating in the skits, as well as taking back her statement, claiming that this lawsuit was a shakedown. According
But wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. So we're saying that she did something. We're saying you want to hold her accountable. What do you think about that, Lisa? Do you think that the settlement accomplishes the goal, at least in your thoughts?
Well, did I hear this correctly that she needs to apologize as a part of the settlement?
Something like that.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, that kind of is a little bit interesting that her legal counsel would permit her to apologize as a part of a settlement. Many times, settlements happen, as you know, Sandy, without anyone admitting any form of responsibility or liability or
Right,
anything. It's just settlement for the sake of getting rid of the potential litigation.
right.
That's how it usually goes down. So for her to apologize, it's almost as if she must admit wrongdoing, which would then potentially open her up possibly for criminal liability from an admission. I don't know.
I don't know. This is always a tough one. And I hate to even listen to this story because it just sounds so off whack to me. But let's see what they got to say here. Let me
to
see.
Radar Online, Haddish and the two alleged victims that sued her and Spears for sexual assault have recently reached a deal to block the public from seeing the original complaint. The court documents that were gathered by the source state that she has worked out a private agreement. Earlier this month, Haddish and Spears were sued by John and Jane Doe after appearing in comedic sketches online. Jane was 14 years old at the time of the filming, while John was 7. It has been reported that Haddish was friends with John and Jane Doe's mother. One skit in question was called Through a Pedophile's Eyes. In the skit,
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I didn't remember the names of the skits. So, what?
The name of the skit was wait, something through a pedophile's eyes?
Unfortunately.
I can't even find the humor in that. I have no there's nothing in me that drums up humor when you say pedophile.
Child, let me try to play and wrap this story up.
Haddish plays John Doe's mother, and she dropped him off to Ari Spears, not knowing that he's a pedophile. Throughout the sketch, Spears would lust after the young boy. According to Radar Online, the lawsuit reads, Haddish and Spears removed the 7-year-old victim from her sister, placed him upstairs in a bedroom, and stripped the child down to his underwear.
That to me, that's some sick, you know what? There's no joke. There's no, Tiffany,
Look,
honey, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for getting down like that.
you know, some of the comments that I saw on this over and over were like, why didn't they just use, you know, some little people? You know, why didn't they, you know, there were just so many why didn't. But
Well,
the
how
biggest
about
why
why
didn't
did
was,
they
why
do
would
it
you
at
do this
all?
joke? Yeah.
Why did you do it? Sorry.
Why,
Yeah.
why this at all? That was the first thing that would pop up. I mean, I think I'm done with this story, Lisa. I can't.
So wait, the only thing I want to know is, was the apology, so it's private. There is a private settlement, which means the terms are not going to be disclosed to the public,
Yeah.
which means I can hardly believe that she has to do a public apology then, or unless it's a private apology, I guess.
That's what I'm thinking. And the other thing is, you know, it seems the lawsuit was dropped, and you know, obviously both of them were involved in this lawsuit. So if the lawsuit is dropped, that means it's dropped against Aries as well. But the interesting part is this settlement was reached with Tiffany. I heard nothing about no settlement with Aries, but I don't even think Aries would have considered, you know, based upon his reaction when this came out, you know, I don't see him agreeing to some kind of settlement unless he did and it was part of this, you know, secret conversation. But who knows?
Remind me of his reaction. What was Aries' reaction?
It was basically, I don't even know. It was almost like, look, people, no, this is not it. I mean, I get if you think it was in poor taste or something, but this is not it. Like, you're not going to bring me down because of this. Like, he was kind of mocking in some ways of, you know, this whole storyline of him being a pedophile or him being a molester, or even, I think Tiffany was distancing herself from the story to begin with. She was like, you know, she hates that she participated in this thing, almost acting as though she wasn't, almost acting as if she wasn't part of the arrangement, like she was just, you know, involved, but it wasn't like her doing. And Doug says something important. Yes, they did say Aries, supposedly he paid a settlement years ago. So this should have never even come back. But I think a lot of folks were speculating that this came back because Aries was tripping on Lizzo. He was dogging Lizzo. And, you know, there's all this, you know, body positivity, shaming, whatever you want to call it. There's always some issues with when it comes to Lizzo here and there, you know, with the news. And it just so happens Aries decided to make Lizzo the, you know, butt of whatever his storyline or jokes, and people were not having it. Well, some people weren't having it. Others, you know, whatever. Comedy is for the, you know, the person who sees it funny. But I don't know. I'm so done.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting though. But it sounds like maybe Tiffany didn't do her part of the settlement. And that's why the thing still was alive. I don't know.
Child,
So that's so interesting. But one quick aside. Speaking of Lizzo, we're gonna have to deal with this in the future, and that is the value of the word bitch. You know why? Because Lizzo uses that term throughout her lyrics like running water. And I noticed that a lot of artists are really don't have any problem with certain terminology. And it's almost like everybody just accepts it like, oh, well. And I'm kind of tired of it already. And Lizzo needs to represent for women, and everybody else is out there using bitch so freely in all their lyrics. Come on, guys, we can do better than that. I think that's another show for another day, probably.
I'm gonna give no comment to that because I feel like we're just in a time warp. We're in a time where people just, there's no boundaries, standards, you know, regulations, and you and I having this conversation, I feel like you get more negative reaction than, maybe we should uphold some sense of some standards. Maybe we should stop using certain terms. Maybe, you know, people are more adamant to fight against you about things that would logically make sense. I just have no comment. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we just have to do better. But you're right, Sandy. We have lost a lot of standards overall,
yeah.
not only in this nation. I mean, hell, we're on the verge of losing democracy. So, we've definitely lost some standards here. But we need to hold on to some foundational things that keep our world operating in decency and order, and how we talk and refer to each other is a good start.
Child, I say a prayer over us.
Say a little prayer for us.
Doug says Tiffany wasn't a part of the previous settlement, so I guess it would only make sense for her to be settling right now. And Rigo says, what about Hurricane Ivan? Any news on that? I'm very, I would say, biased when it comes to hurricanes. I'm really not into the hype. I just prepare and sit back. And prepare for me is just sit your behind down.
Well, wait, Sandy, first of all, you need to go through your little Florida scenario of how Floridians deal with hurricanes, because that was the show before the show, and that almost had me on my knees right there alone.
I would have to play a video for you. So we'll have to get back to that towards the close. I'm gonna find the video and cue that up, because this guy, comedian on Instagram, he definitely gives me life. Actually, I found the video. He definitely gives me life whenever we start talking about storms. So before we get to the I Am Athlete and other story, I'm going to play a little something from this Instagrammer. His name is OMG It's Wix. And he always does Florida specific things. So specifically, I want to play something that he did with, Floridians and their perspective when it comes to storms. So let's see here.
Tropical storm, bro. That's 3 o'clock every afternoon in Florida. Hey, bro, it just got upgraded to a Category 1, boy. It's time to, hey, call in the party. Call in the party, bro. Hey, bro, that thing done hit a 2, bro. That means we finna be lit, bro. We finna be lit, bro. Now, get the mic hards, get the twisted tees, bro. It's about to be lit. Hey, bro, it's a Category 3. Man, listen, ain't nothing to worry, bro. What you worried for? It's a Category 3, bro. Hey, bro, it's a Category 4. Yeah, it hit a 4. I'm gonna go ahead and get some water, just some small stuff, but I ain't worried, bro. Why would I leave? Hey, what's up, bro? You see that thing hit a 5? Hey, bro, call the Waffle House, see if they open. You did? Bro, the Waffle House closed? Hey, but let's get out of here, because we all know, bro, the Waffle House don't close, bro. Ain't no
Look, I the only thing I can say is facts, like facts. A lot of times we in Florida, we just, hurricanes come in and we are, I'm okay. It's only this. It's probably going to turn. And then it'll be like Category 3 and 4, and now you see people starting to board up.
I know.
It'll be like Category 5, people sitting there risking their lives.
It's like, I guess we better do something. But no, what I loved was My Publix fried chicken shirt. I am in love with that shirt.
You need to check out his channel. He does all things Florida. Publix is part of his program when it comes to, he's always eating some chicken. Notice he has a flip phone, so he has not upgraded to our smartphone status. He eats Publix fried chicken, Publix pastries and desserts. He's always drinking Publix lemonade or something else, and everything that he does on his Instagram is just comedy when it comes to Florida. Like, if you're a Floridian, you'll understand. If you're not a Floridian and you've been here long enough, you'll understand too.
And what's his name again?
His channel is OMG It's Wix. Let me add it again so you could see it.
Okay.
OMG It's Wix.
Okay. OMG
OMGITSWICKS.
He is too funny with his flip phone. He has me on the floor with that one.
He has 1.3 million on TikTok. Good Lord.
Wow. And he just does sketch comedy.
Florida specific sketch comedy. That's all he does. I love it.
I do too. That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I didn't know about OMG It's Wix.
Look, from a Floridian to another Florida, I'm at least a Florida transplant, but I've been here so long enough, I think, to be considered a Floridian.
Of course.
All right, so let's take a look at the other side of the coin. So last time we were chatting, we were talking about the Pivot podcast, which consists of 2 former members of the I Am Athlete podcast, which was Brandon Marshall, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder. So they split. Basically, Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder left and they pivoted to their Pivot podcast, and they added another former athlete, Ryan Clark, and Brandon Marshall, who is still with I Am Athlete, just added some other folks to the cast. So it was an interesting split because I used to heavily watch I Am Athlete. I loved the perspectives of former athletes, kind of educating up and coming athletes, and learning lessons from each other, bringing on different guest speakers. Some guests that they've had are like Deion Sanders, and they've had athletes from different categories of sports. They've also had non-athletes here and there on their show as well, just to share their experiences in business and family and the whole nine. But today we're going to kind of lean in a little bit to the I Am Athlete side of the story to see what our thoughts are. But what are your thoughts, Lisa, from the last video? Like, what did it kind of leave you with?
It just left me with a sense that the business wasn't really figured out. The business portion of that venture wasn't really figured out or thought through very well.
Right.
Up to the point where when money is made and no one really discussed equity interests, now it's all being brought up in the middle of a successful show. And now you have to sort this out. And if you don't agree, then things fall apart right there. And that's what it reminds me of as far as what happened.
And I will say the only thing that I appreciate about it is it didn't become a war of sides, right? I didn't see I Am Athlete pitted against Pivot Podcast. It seemed like I Am Athlete continues to grow and thrive, and Pivot Podcast has grown drastically in a very short period of time. So it tells you that there's room for everybody.
Yeah,
that's what it tells me.
I like that part. Yeah.
All right, so let's see what Brandon Marshall has to say. He briefly addressed this early on when this first happened, because this happened some time ago, earlier in the year. So this is some commentary from Brandon in May.
Okay.
Podcast I Am Athlete that gave you notoriety, especially in the media space, and your former co-host.
So I'm going to just point out here. So Brandon Marshall is on the far right. Chad Ochocinco, which is to the left of him, was a regular on I Am Athlete as well. He was basically part of the, I would say, original cast. And then you have to his left Fred Taylor, and then to his left Channing Crowder. Now, the interesting part is Brandon, Fred, and Channing, to my understanding, started I Am Athlete, the podcast, together. So, it was kind of sitting around during the pandemic, and they're like, you're not doing nothing, let's do something. And Ocho Cinco was just a great addition to me because it felt like you had a lot of elements amongst the four of them, somebody for everybody, right? And you could find some entertainment in each of them. So I just wanted to point that out just in case, people are clueless like I was when I first, started watching. I didn't know who any of these folks were.
Mm-hmm.
Channing Crowder and Fred Taylor, they spoke about the breakup, and they said Brandon made the initial investment. He took it upon himself to gain the majority of the control and the ideas. You've been relatively quiet on the matter, so what is your response to that initial quote and the breakup of the three of you?
I mean, just business, a lot of times when we start these things, we have these ideas, you just go and everything's not necessarily buttoned up from the beginning. But yeah.
This is what you said, Lisa, right?
Yeah, that's it.
It wasn't buttoned up. So that shirt was open, showing them the little choco meat.
Exactly.
Fred's right. Invested $11 million into the company. And it's not just I Am Athlete. There's 67 employees and a couple consultants here and there. I think they're doing well. We're doing well. And, now it's about moving forward and keeping things, steady.
Wow.
Brandon, you ain't answer that question. You alluded to an answer, but you didn't answer that question.
He's talking about moving on and continuing with success. He done glossed all over the problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if you can think back to the Pivot Podcast response, and you're thinking right now to his response, it's almost as if whatever was said is to him, Brandon Marshall, irrelevant. He's just like moving on. And I'm like, I think it is a bit relevant to the fans. Because I'm going to tell you something. As a person who watches both, I lean towards the pivot because for whatever reason, I saw elements of behaviors on I Am Athlete that kind of told me, I kind of like the vibe of Fred and Channing and this Ryan Clark thing more so than I feel what I see at I Am Athlete. Now, that's not to say that I don't watch both and appreciate both and think both have some great elements. But I feel like I wish there was a little more of an answer there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
something's not answered. And when it's not answered, it gives me a leaning towards, well, maybe there is some truth to what's not being addressed.
And Sandy, you have to think like he sounds like the business brain behind pulling things together.
Yeah.
He says there is a team. There are lots of employees. There are some business advisor types. So folks are in his ear about how to structure what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't sound like everybody is privy to those inside details, but he certainly is. And
Right.
I think that right there alone can leave a bitter taste in your business partner's mouth. If it looks like you're in control of everything, they really aren't running anything, they're just there. So the problems are going to happen. And so if he's so wise or if he has advisors, it seems like he would have anticipated we're going to sit down, we need to iron this out before we get too much farther along and things might break down. Nobody
And-
thought about that.
And that's where I don't like his response. I feel like his response just kind of coats over the whole issue as if it's not even warranting a response. And the problem is you got fans. And
That's
fans
true.
like myself, when I see that you're not really addressing an issue at all, it kind of gives me a lot of pause.
Can lose
And it
some
makes me-
business that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it. Let's see what else he says.
Because you've been silent on the matter, this is actually the first time you've spoken about it in some regard. There have been narratives about your character. People have called you greedy and selfish and possessive. What do you want to say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, listen, playing in the NFL for 13 years, we're media trained, you know, super set.
Lisa, you're media trained for real because you're not answering the question.
Yeah, you're trained like a politician, bro.
Heavy, and been through a lot. You know, you understand how to handle certain situations. You know, it's one of those things where I feel what's best is for me to continue to do my work and continue to, you know, do the things that we're doing with other athletes and helping athletes and letting that do the talk, right? Like, you know, Channing Crowder was awesome. Fred Taylor was awesome, and you know, I wish them well.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't.
Enough said. Enough
I'm
said.
not.
right
I'm not
there.
saying that he had to cuss them out, but it would have been appreciated. And I think he does address it a little bit more detailed over time.
Okay.
There are some other videos, so folks, you can kind of check that out and you know just type in Brandon Marshall, I Am Athlete breakup, and you'll find a ton of other interviews that he's done. But what I didn't like about this specific interview, and I'm not going to try to be biased, I'm just going to say this: I didn't like that he really wasn't answering the question at all. And I would rather him say, look, I don't want to address any questions about this. I would have actually rathered that. I'm just interested in moving forward and just say that because you've now allowed this lady to ask you 2 straight questions back to back about the breakup and you didn't address anything about the breakup at all. You just
Right. But and
media,
like you
media
said,
training.
and like you said, Sandy, he could have been very blunt and direct, saying, I'm not going to address anything to do with the breakup, but I will talk about moving forward. And what's the
Yeah.
value of that? At least you're acknowledging that I heard your question. I'm just not going to answer it.
Yeah.
And he may be under the advice of legal counsel. Maybe
Facts.
someone is saying, watch what you say moving forward,
Right.
because we're not even sure if these folks, you know, may or may not file a lawsuit still on, you know, dealing with some things as far as the breakup. So
Yeah.
let's just be careful about what you say. It could be all of that, but you know what? We're all intelligent. He can let us know that.
You know, I always love these stories because, you know, as an attorney, I mean, I probably would advise him, first of all, not to address these issues at all. And second of all, if I'm going on an interview, that would be the first thing that's on my list of no's. Do not ask me any questions about A, B, and C. Because then it always looks funny when you're like the person asks you a question, you don't answer. Person asks you another question, you don't answer. It's just kind of like, okay, bruh. Rigo says, NYB, not your business. That should have been his answer. I mean, I think, in interview form, I mean, that could be addressed. Like if we have a guest on our podcast, as an example, they can tell us, look, we not, Doug says, I want tea. Doug, trust and believe, Doug. You know what happened to me was when I was watching I Am Athlete, I was watching I Am Athlete all the time. Like I caught a lot of their interviews, and it was just the sync of the four gentlemen and some of the guests that would come on was just amazing to me. And I learned a lot about, athletes. I learned a lot about how they had issues, when it comes to money, why those issues existed. So when they split, I was just like, bruh, there should be a response. Now, the first response I saw was when they did branched off to the Pivot podcast. They actually did their first episode of the podcast. They talked about the whole issue. They said, we're going to just lay it out on the line, and now we're going to move forward. So I appreciated that. And I wish I Am Athlete personally had done the same, because then it would have said to me, all right, he said his part, I choose who I want to believe, and then we can move on. But now it's kind of like I've heard their side. And every time Brandon speaks, he kind of gives like, sometimes he'll say something, like just a little something, but I notice the next time he speaks on it, he doesn't say anything. So I think, like you said, Lisa, there's some stuff. And trust me, Doug, we might have to turn this into a Black business tea time, because I feel like sometimes I really want to know, because, things happen in business and it's very, very different. And I'm going to give something personal. I have my own circumstance with my business where we've, parted ways, but it wasn't parting ways out of anything negative. It's just, my partner had an opportunity and I just chose to continue the business. But going through the situation is, we decided up front, we were just going to say what we had to say at the beginning, put it on, our platforms or whatever, and let it go like that. Because there was no hard feelings about it. It's just, everybody grows and changes and does what they do. But that doesn't mean that I can't continue doing what I do. I can still thrive and she can thrive and we're both fine.
And that's the way it's supposed to be. But what's missing, and I think this is a very key point for business owners,
right,
is that when you are very public and everybody's watching you and your branding and your style, transparency really matters. Because people have buy-in. They buy in with you. Like they like you. They like your business. They like what you represent. And so you have a whole lot of buy-in. And so all of a sudden, when you're no longer seemingly transparent to people and they really can't figure you out and things get a little cloudy about you, that translates into a loss of reputation in business and otherwise. And a lot of people forget about that part.
So to answer Doug's statement, yes, Sandy wants tea. I want a little something that I can sip. Give me something, because I feel like as a fan of both, I think we should get a little something. I'm not saying you got to tell us all the details, but when Brandon did that PR move, I said, bruh, no.
Come on, bro.
So we're going to close out this episode talking about something very important, because we're about to hit the fourth quarter. And as business owners, fourth quarter is that wrap up. It's like whatever you didn't do quarter 1, 2, and 3, you need to try to figure out how to tie up some loose ends and pray that your accountant even cares at that point. Because if you weren't dealing with them early in the year, they're gonna be looking at you like, bro, you're not tax planning at this point. You're just, surviving.
That's true. That's true. So we have to constantly think about these things. And as business owners, when you're self-employed, there's a number of expenses that you can write off as a part of doing business. And so we thought we'd talk about some of these things. We're going to actually bring an accountant on, someone who's actually trained to answer questions. But we know some of the expenses that we can write off. For instance, I have an office every month. So my business lease payment, they become a business expense, and I can write those things off. That's a good thing. So that's one thing. And we'll do about 5 or 6. Sandy?
One of my favorites of all time is people don't realize how important equipment is to their business and how it can be a great deduction that helps you reduce, your tax liability depending on your circumstances. So again, I'm not an accountant. I never professed to be, because honestly, my accountant has been a godsend in being able to know, all right, here's some things you can do. Here's some things you can't do. But equipment, and we don't think of equipment as laptop, right? The software that we pay for, the services that we probably pay for, that may be technologically based. Um, a lot of times we don't think about the little things that we purchase that we use as equipment. For example, you buy a new desk, you buy a new monitor, you buy a tablet, you might buy a cell phone for like a staff person that's
Mhm.
working with you. All of those little nuances. You buy a camera, a microphone. I think last year I wrote off microphone. I think I bought. I don't remember if I bought another camera, a microphone camera. I want to say there was a laptop thing or something else. Like I wrote off quite a few things. And this year my goal is I need to upgrade on some things. I definitely need a brand new laptop. I need another tablet because some of the work that I'm doing is really, really off grid now, remote. I need to pay for some new software. All of those things may fall under the list. You, of course, have to consult with your accountant, but there's a long list of things that fall under equipment. And many times, not all the time, many times those things can be dollar for dollar, depending on whether you're writing them off outright or whether or not you're doing depreciation. But the also other thing I wanted to share is the more that you know, the better that you're able to organize your business affairs and deduct things properly, because you don't want to write off every little drop. You have to be mindful how it affects your life. So you always want to consult with somebody who knows better.
Right, because that's also showing that you made those earnings. If you have those expenses, that's also an indication that you had the earnings to cover those expenses. And so another thing is your payroll. Paying yourself, paying your employees. Again, refer to your accountant for the proper tax treatment. But those are certain business expenses that get special treatment on your taxes, your payroll. So that's something, and payroll taxes. Those are things that go along with payroll. So those expenses is something else that I think that we obviously are mindful off on an annual basis.
One that is also my favorite is people don't recognize that when they're using social media and they pay for ads and things like that, those are things that you can write off as well. That conference that you go to that you maybe bought a booth, those are things that you can potentially write off. Little things that you may do that you don't recognize. For example, there are some people that wrap their cars and
Yes.
cover their
Yes.
cars with their business information, or you buy your business cards, or you purchase a website or pay someone to build a
Yes.
website. All of that counts. Rigo says, what is the best accountant or bookkeeper would you recommend? So here's the thing, a relationship with an accountant, just like a relationship with an attorney, a doctor, or anybody else that provides a professional service, is a personal one. It's important that you get with someone that you can actually communicate with. I met my accountant through a Chamber of Commerce event in one of the local communities, and I loved his vibe. I loved the way that he talked about business and the things that we as business owners need to be mindful of. And he was very matter of fact, and I was like, I need someone like that, because I'm one of those people. I need the trainer that is going to be like on my behind. That's the
Yeah.
type of trainer I need. And so my accountant had to be one of those. Oh, so you don't want to turn in papers to me in time? Oh, no problem. We're going to hit you a fee. Next year, you'll remember. That's my accountant. It's like, oh, okay, you want to turn in stuff like within a few days of the tax deadline? That's no problem. Your bill just going to be high. So
Mm-hmm.
that next year, you'll be like, oh, so and so, I got my papers in early, and he would just laugh. And I'm just like, but I need that. That's the type of person that I need.
That's very important. And mine, it was kind of the same type of thing. I did ask around, and I just went and interviewed some accountants. And it does, like Sandy said, boils down to that personal relationship. Are they understanding you? Do you feel that you're understanding where they're coming from? And do you feel that there's a solid trust relationship where you can do business with them? The
Right.
other thing is I look for responsiveness. If I have a question real time, if I can contact my accountant or that office and get some information or guidance in real time, that's the right type of outfit for me because they are responsive. So responsiveness is very important to me as well. Good question, Rigo.
That is facts.
Sandy, you mentioned marketing and advertising. That's a really good one. I was thinking about, publications and licenses and memberships.
Yeah.
We're members of the Florida Bar. We're members of other organizations where you have to pay fees to be members, and we receive legal publications and other types of publications. Me, also real estate license fees. All of these things are expenses that can be written off. Don't forget about, some people will write off gifts to others. When your business gives a gift to someone else, that could be considered a business expense as well. Check with your accountant for limitations on things like that. The other thing, gas and oil. If you use your vehicle, and maybe even a portion of your car note, again, you need to check with your accountant for the proper tax treatment. But these are all things that could be potential expenses that you can write off against your income, which will what? Ultimately lower the amount of money that you're taxed on. And that is the goal.
Being a foodie, I would say business meals. Keep in mind that doesn't mean that you just sitting there, you said one word about business and then your meal is covered. With moderation, of course, keeping in mind, like when you're traveling, there are certain allowances that you can make for yourself for business meals. Also in day to day, like if you meet with somebody for lunch and you want to, you're trying to pitch your business or you're trying to network and things like that, there's certain things that you can write off. Now, I know that the IRS has some restrictions on how much you can write off, et cetera. And also keeping documentation is critical.
Yes.
But business meals are great ways for you to kind of, keep building business and also doing things for your employees. So like those lunches that you might do on occasion, special snacks or something that you purchase for the office. A lot of those little things can be done. And also business travel. Now, I'm in France right now, so I'm not trying to write off this as a business travel expense. But if I were coming here for something business related, there are things that I could potentially do to write that off. But of course, I have to show some documentation to provide, okay, what you going to France for if you're a lawyer? Like I could see if you're a photographer, maybe, if you're in the fashion industry, maybe if you're an international lawyer and you're setting up a base. Like I know a lawyer that practices in Florida and practices here locally in France.
Nice.
That's, you could potentially have certain deductions depending on how it connects with your business. So again, all of the things that we are saying are not, legal advice or financial advice. We're simply saying consult with an accountant because there is a long list of things that you could potentially deduct, but being mindful that you may not want to, based on your circumstances, deduct everything. So you got to keep that in mind too.
Absolutely. And we will be working to get an accountant on to answer some of your questions as we lead up to the end of the year, because a lot of business people have end of year tax questions for things they probably haven't done for the first 9 months of the year.
They're trying to catch up. Look, I pray that I can get my accountant to come on because they are definitely a character of all proportions and they'll get us whipped into shape. So we'll see.
Good. Love it, Sandy.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. We definitely always have a good time and we look forward to sharing with you some more entrepreneur news mix. And definitely stay tuned for our accountant that will come and share some tips for us as we enter the fourth quarter. And please don't hesitate to click the subscribe button and click the like button. Be sure to share this video and make sure that we continue to build our numbers here. But we appreciate you guys. Have a great one.
Thank you, guys. Talk to
Bye.
you soon. Bye-bye.